Genius is a trading terminal, and to back up even a little bit more than that, it's a cross-chain trading terminal, which basically just means that it is a way to access more than 500 DEXs on multiple chains, over 10 chains. And the idea here being that all of the assets that exist on those chains can be bought through a single interface, where much of the complexity of navigating between different chains in order to get to an asset is completely abstracted away.
Which inefficiencies do you think that remain today, including within your own model?
I think people sometimes get confused because we've made it very easy to go from chain A to chain B. But I think the main inefficiency, it's fatigue. It's management fatigue. You have 500,000 different assets on 50 different chains. At some point, you need to figure out a way to manage all of them. At some point, you need a way to consolidate all of them and just trade as one balance, right? And I think that's like a very important part of why centralized exchange UX feels non-exhausting.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lorena Nessi from CCN, and today I'm joined by Armaan Kalsi, CEO of Trading Genius. In this conversation, we're going to talk about what Genius actually is and how decisions are taken behind the scenes. We'll also discuss why trading terminals are starting to rival exchanges, along with the real challenges of cross-chain trading in the trade-offs between execution and privacy, and what it takes for a platform to become core infrastructure rather than just another interface. Thank you so much, Armaan, for being with us today at CCN. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, these sound like great questions, and I'm excited to answer them and give you some clarity.
Brilliant. Well, let's start from the beginning. Maybe you can tell us what Genius actually is.
Genius is a trading terminal, and to back up even a little bit more than that, it's a cross-chain trading terminal, which basically just means that it is a way to access more than 500 DEXs on multiple chains, over 10 chains. I'm talking about Solana, Arbitrum, obviously BSC chain, Optimism, Base, Polygon, etc., etc. And the idea here being that all of the assets that exist on those chains can be bought through a single interface, where much of the complexity of navigating between different chains in order to get to an asset is completely abstracted away. So our thinking is, in the same way that on centralized exchanges, um, the user is thinking, okay, I have money, I want to buy an asset. We want to bring that UX effectively to crypto. And there's more than one ways in which we're trying to think of this as like a quote unquote centralized exchange on chain without giving up any of the guarantees of decentralization and non-custodianship. But for the most part, like that is what Genius is. It exists to replicate the ease of use of a centralized exchange on chain, but it also exists to replicate the efficiency of market structure of a centralized exchange kind of on chain as well, which is a part that we'll definitely talk more about.
Okay, and in simple terms, what do you think Genius intentionally refuses to actually be or build in comparison to other platforms?
That's a really good question because I think number one, you have to really say no aggressively to the UX that has dominated user behavior in crypto for the last 8 or 9 years, right? Which is signing, exporting, signing again, 4 different signatures for a single transaction, forcing the user to learn about gas as opposed to just doing things via sponsorships, etc. Right? So I think we've been very, very intentional about making sure that the core issues of trading on chain, or I guess not core issues, but the parts of trading on chain that become core issues for new users and become prohibitive for new users, are completely abstracted away if you want them to be abstracted away. And so we're pretty intentional about that. I think we're also pretty intentional about like asking questions around intellectually honest questions around why do people use centralized exchanges versus using on-chain trading. Like, what are the genuine trade-offs between the two, and what forces people to go back to centralized exchanges time and time and time again? Why are they still so dominant? And I have a lot of answers to that question and a lot of solutions to how we kind of port those users over to decentralized exchanges and terminals like Genius.
What are those answers then?
Well, I think it boils down to 3 things, right? So number one is UX, number two is market structure, and number three is discretion and privacy. So UX I just addressed in terms of signing, bridging, blah blah blah. You just have money, you buy an asset. Number two is market structure. I think AMMs have been okay. They've served their job in crypto. They've been okay. They're very capital inefficient. They're a very capital inefficient way to make markets. Vanilla AMMs, passive AMMs are a very capital inefficient way to make markets. And I think prop AMMs, by contrast, represent kind of a centralized exchange approach to making markets on chain, right? Where you have people running their own prop strategies and pricing strategies off chain, and then posting the price curve on chain, and giving people incredibly tight spreads so that you can go to something like called comparesol.com, which I think was built by Vibhu at the Sol Foundation, and you can see how the kind of main prop AMMs on Solana are doing really, really well, and are kind of trading at negative edge relative to the median of pricing or median spread at some centralized exchanges like OKX and like Bybit, etc. They're just cheaper. It's actually cheaper to trade on chain than it is to trade on a centralized exchange, which is obviously not the case for all assets, but it definitely is the case for majors. And I think a big part of what we're doing, because I think we would consider, and it's no secret that our home base, our home chain is BNB chain, and is kind of the BNB ecosystem. What we're doing, right, is amazing. We've brought the UX and the kind of user mentality of a centralized exchange on part one. Part two is how do you bring the prop AMMs, how do you bring over that market efficiency and tightness of spreads for majors to users on BNB chain. And so that's kind of our next goal, is building out, this is what I said, right? It's layers and layers. And so the second layer is the market structure. And then the third is privacy. Like people like trading on centralized exchanges because they're somewhat hidden in the order books. They're somewhat hidden. You don't know exactly who it is. You just, all you can see is that a trade has happened. You don't know exactly who's done it. And I think that is actually something that people value a lot more than they let on. And as a function of that, centralized exchanges will always have that because they're able to be compliant while also allowing privacy. And so replicating that on chain while being compliant but also being private is a pretty big part of what we're trying to do as well.
Okay, great. So tell me a little bit about you. What took you to this position, to do what you're doing? And what do you actually control or do inside Genius right now on a daily
Sure.
basis?
I originally got into crypto through ideological reasons. I think in early 2020 into 2021. Built my first crypto company in 2022. It was effectively a B2B company in crypto, which, by the way, is its own challenge. I think, especially in 2022 after DeFi summer, it's a very different industry now than it was then. I think building a B2B business works more now. But what we were doing was building block explorers that had kind of an inbuilt custom trained LLM. And that custom trained LLM, you could ask it any questions about the block data. It would translate it to pure English. It would also allow you to basically, our goal was like Google for crypto, right? And it was around the time that L2s were taking off as well. It was called Lore. We did pretty well, actually. We had some B2B contracts out with some pretty major chains out there, including some that eventually became our investors in Genius. And the more we were looking at on-chain data, the more we were just looking at the fact that really the only actions, because this is still at the time in crypto's history where people are thinking, okay, everything will be on chain. Like your bet with your friend will be on chain. Your contract to, like, I don't know, walk someone's dog will be on chain. And like, but the data wasn't really showing that. What the data was showing was that people were just trading, and that was 99.9% of what people were doing. And so it just decided to kind of optimize around that tool or that specific UX in 2024 and solve that problem. We called it the UX problem at the time, but then the more we dug, it became deeper and deeper. What I do at the company is effectively think and talk and delegate. And I think those are kind of the three main things that I'm responsible for. Is obviously like where we're going as a whole, as a ship overall, like what products we want to add, what products we don't want to add, and how do you actually get to the layered thesis that I explained before, right? So UX, market structure, privacy, and like sandwiching all three of those together and actually packaging that into a product is my main goal. And so every engineer that we hire, every kind of decision that we take here on product is all driven towards that one goal. And I think it's my job to just make sure that we actually get there.
Great. And whose responsibility or who has the responsibility to actually do something when anything breaks, when something
That
breaks?
is That is a shared responsibility for our engineering team. Obviously, our CTO as well as VP of engineering have the bulk of that responsibility, right? But we're about an 11 or 12 person engineering team. Um, Beyond those two as well. So it's very much a shared responsibility. We're not the kind of organization that points fingers necessarily, but at the same time, obviously people have to be accountable, and that's kind of whose responsibility is when something breaks. Ultimately, it's all my responsibility, right? I think that's just the way that it trickles down. But in individual pods and in individual kind of teams, it's easy to assign responsibility.
What about the name? Did you foresee that Genius was going to be such a staple name when referring to crypto, and that your platform was going to have such a background in a way?
Honestly, no, not at all. I just liked the name and I liked the domain. And I thought that it hadn't been done. And this is also before the Genius Act. In crypto, like for stables, became such a major part of legislation, and people started referring to it as Genius all caps. So no, like I had no concept that this would go the way that it did. Um, but at the same time, I like the name. It's catchy, and it's simple, and it's not like a nonsense word, and it's a good domain. It's tradegenius.com. So, yeah, I like it.
Absolutely. It probably was a surprise, right? That suddenly we had the Genius Act and you had the platform with
Yeah,
that same name.
no,
I guess
definitely.
it's probably good luck, would you say?
I
Or
would
was
hope so.
Okay, good. What about terminal wars? Let's go into terminal wars and market power.
Yeah.
Terminal wars that suggest that the battle is shifting from these exchanges to tools that traders are using to access. So, what exactly you think that terminals are fighting to control, and why does that control matter for traders?
Terminal wars just refers to the fact that there was a lot of volume bumped through decentralized terminals over the last 2 years. I think primarily in the context of meme coins more than anything else. And what it means more than anything is that people value access to opportunity more than they value, let's say, the centralized exchange UX per se, right? And so I think when meme coins were at the point of creation, you could go from 0 to 100x in the span of 5 to 10 minutes. They became an incredible venue for people to do that. And obviously, still a decent amount of our volume is made up by people still speculating on assets in the same niche that I just mentioned to you. Um, However, the way that I think about the terminal wars is a little bit long term. Right? You said, I think pretty aptly, that the way to think about this is people are choosing decentralized tools over centralized exchanges. Then the forward-looking question is, why would they continue to do that? Right? Like, what are the assets that they would trade in a decentralized way that aren't necessarily on centralized exchanges from day one? And I think we're excited about so many different things in that realm, right? Like we're excited about the tokenization of equities. We're excited about the tokenization of exotic derivatives that may not necessarily exist on centralized exchanges that you would have on, let's say, an Aster, for example, that you want to trade through our front end. And so I think generally speaking, like if there are two theses, right? Like if thesis number one is everything is going to be tokenized, and that tokenization will live raw on chain and it won't live behind like 100 different permissioned layers, then you genuinely need a terminal that gets you to the because like that all of the sophistication of that finance cannot live through a Uniswap swap widget, right? Like it just can't. That's not the way that I think the sophistication works. So I think like if that plays out in the way that we think it'll play out, I think it's a very interesting bet, and where Genius is positioned is quite bullish. I think on the other hand, there's also the thing to consider where speculation is a pretty core PMF in crypto, right? And we will continue to serve the cohort of users who like speculation, who want to speculate, and speculation reinvents itself every 3 years in crypto, right? You had the NFTs. Prior to that, you had just had tokens, right? You weren't calling them alts at the time, you were just calling them tokens and ICOs and tokens. And then you had meme coins. And so the question is like, what will that next lever of speculation actually look like? And I think we're pretty well positioned to capture that as well. So that's what I mean by terminal wars and where this is all going.
What do you think will be the next level of speculation then? Do you have any idea?
I don't know. I don't know. I think a good guess is prediction markets. A good guess is like where we're at with prediction markets. But as far as I can see right now, prediction markets are basically sports betting and crypto pricing option platforms. There's politics like in the mix when there's a politically relevant event. For sure, there is a politics in the mix, but it's not it's not the majority of the volume, right? Like the majority of the volume is just sports because that's a legible way of betting for most people, and then it's crypto price because most people on these platforms anywhere are crypto native in some capacity. So I think that's more where we're going.
I think it's fascinating, right? Because these elements, especially politics or sports, are really very human elements. And it doesn't really how
Hmm.
much data you can accumulate, which now we are able to accumulate a lot. You still have to find the right paths to predict them, right? To predict a specific outcome.
100%.
So I don't know.
100%. Yeah.
It will be very interesting to see what happens in that field next. Anyway, let's talk about some inefficiencies in multi-chain trading. Which inefficiencies do you think that remain today, including within your own model?
I think people sometimes get confused because we've made it very easy to go from chain A to chain B. And we use third-party providers in the back end, right? Like Relay, etc. So sometimes funds take a little bit longer to get from chain A to chain B. And people are just a little bit confused. They're like, why did this take so long? And I think that speaks to the fact that we've done a pretty good job of abstracting everything else. And that you kind of don't know that you're on multiple chains, and at the second that you find out that one transaction from, let's say, Seoul to BNB taking a minute to land, or like 30 seconds to land, or 50 seconds to land, versus everything else lands in sub one block. For most of our single chain stuff, it just is a bit confusing. But I think the main inefficiency for terminals that aren't as kind of co-integrated across multiple different chains, networks, and exchanges that we are, um, is it's fatigue. It's like it's management fatigue. You have 500,000 different assets on 50 different chains. At some point, you need to figure out a way to manage all of them. At some point, you need a way to consolidate all of them and just trade as one balance, right? And I think that's like a very important part of why centralized exchange UX feels non-exhausting. You don't feel tired on a centralized exchange. You just feel like you've done one core action as opposed to bridging, signing, bridging again, signing again, and so on and so forth. And then you finally get your money. And then when you get your money, it's like, okay, is this a gas asset? If this is not a gas asset, am I screwed? And I think that's also a pretty big part of it. And so I think we've done a good job at educating users that there's like a difference between a single chain versus a cross chain transaction. Still, though, I think it's a nascent thing for it to be completely abstracted in the way that we've abstracted it. So, especially because we don't have like a separate bridge page, we just call it all swapping. Right. So if you're swapping from Sol to BNB, or if you're swapping from like Sol to, I don't know, like Link on Sol, for example, right? There's no difference in the way that you would perceive the UX. We just give you a little warning at the bottom that says this is a cross chain swap. Might take a little bit longer. People often ignore that and then ask us why it's taking a little bit longer, but that's no problem at all. I just think that means that the job is being done well.
Okay, great. You talk about privacy for central exchanges. What is your specific approach to privacy and what are the trade offs?
Yeah, for sure. We're doing, I think, something similar to what Aster is doing. I don't know if you saw their Aster L1. And this is not to say we're competitive at all. We're like very much collaborative. Like the whole approach between the whole two teams is, I kind of think of them as just building incredible foundations, where also building things that are very simpatico. But like our approach to privacy is less at the point of execution, and so this is where we come to trade-offs, and more at the point of funding. And so we basically make it very easy for you to obfuscate compliantly, right? Obfuscate how you are getting funds from one-to-one wallet, or from one to, let's say, 100 wallets, 1,000 wallets, 10,000 wallets, however you want to do it. We give you really easy UX to manage all of that, right? And so privacy is less you're shielded from the mempool, or you're completely shielded, all your transactions are invisible, or anything like that. And privacy for us is more, how do you, like, the money that you are using in wallet X is completely unlinked from wallet Y, wallet Z, etc., and you can kind of trade with that peace of mind, knowing that. Now you can also do that from one to many or one to one in terms of the control. So 1 to 1,000 wallets and then orchestrate the 1,000 wallets, or 1 to 1 wallet and then just execute that. Now, if you're doing 1 to 1, we could probably do at time of, at time of trade, at time of execution, we could do that privacy obfuscation for you. But if you're doing 1 to like 1,000, for example, that takes time. Right. And so that's the trade-off. The trade-off is that it takes time in order to give you that privacy. And we're far ways away from like proper centralized exchange parity at the point of execution. But I think like we're doing the best that we can right now without introducing heavy off-chain compute like zero knowledge proving, etc., and just giving you the ability to go from like, I have this capital in wallet one. I want to move it to wallet two. I don't want them to be linked. I want wallet two to be my private wallet. I want to execute with wallet two. Like, how do I do that without breaking any laws? And that's kind of the question that we're answering with what we call Ghost Protocol.
Okay, well, for our final question, is there a specific objective metric that would prove that Genius has become core infrastructure by the end of the year or in the next 2 years?
I have a number in mind for, how much volume I want our front end to process versus how much volume I want the proper AMM efforts that we're doing to process by end of year. I think right now we're at like about 15 or so billion in spot volume that we've done in the last 2 months. I'd be very happy if we just continued this and continued to grow at the rate that we're growing, which we're very excited about. But no, I don't think there's a core metric. I think it's just like, we want the infrastructure that we're building to be ubiquitous, and we want to be the chain default more than anything else. We just want to be the chain default, and that's kind of the idea.
Well, good luck with that. We're going to definitely keep an eye on it and see how it goes.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much, Armaan. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I think that's it. I think just, trade on Genius. Let us know how your experience goes. Myself and Ryan are available to you on Telegram. You can actually DM us. You can DM the larger Telegram group. We're not anon, obviously, as you can see. And yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today at CCN, and speak to you soon then.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.